All right, so if you don't know, the House just recently passed the addition to the stimulus package that was signed by the president over the weekend. That initial stimulus package was for $600 for every American. President Trump said, wait a minute, that's not enough. And he also said there's a lot of pork in this spending, and so I'm not going to sign it. And he waited almost a week to sign it, which by most accounts, we're still waiting to find out for sure. By most accounts, that may have cost some of you who are on unemployment a week's worth of unemployment benefits. I don't know for sure if that is happening. So the president said, I think it should be $2,000, not $600. And House Democrats said, dude, we've been asking for that the whole time. And so they went today, and they needed, by the way, because this is an amendment to the stimulus spending that was just signed by the president, they needed a 2/3 majority in order to pass the $2,000 per person spending. And they got it. So it barely passed. And so now the question is, will the Senate take it up? And I want to know from you, do you think that the Senate should pass this stimulus? In fact, I want to know from you personally. Are you in a situation where you need the stimulus check? Have you been in a situation where because of the pandemic, you are not able to survive or you're running behind on your bills like so many? Would the $600 have made a difference? Would the $2,000 have made a difference? I would like to know. The question is, our Senate Democrat. Wow, I can't speak. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, about a week. So it takes a little bit of time for me to get my mouth moving and get it connected to my brain. So bear with me as I do that. The Senate Republicans will have to take this up. And we don't know if Mitch McConnell is going to do so. We do know that the $600 was the max that Republicans were willing to go. And this whole thing, I have to tell you, with President Trump and his actions right now, it's pretty bizarre. Maybe you can help me understand it. But it's not like the House and the Senate passed this stimulus bill without any feedback from the White House. The White House has had negotiators. The Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, has been at the Capitol for months working with House Democrats and Senate Republicans in order to come up with some type of agreement for a stimulus package. So the White House has been involved in the negotiations from the very beginning. And at no point that I'm aware of did the president say he wants $2,000. In fact, he didn't say that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he didn't say that until after the House and the Senate passed the bill on the good faith that the White House negotiators that were sent to the Capitol, that they were negotiating on behalf of the president. So they all thought they had this kumbaya moment that had taken months to build. And now all of a sudden, the president goes back on his deal. Now, a lot of you may be saying, well, he went back on his deal because of the pork barrel spending that's inside of the stimulus package. To that, my friends, I say nonsense. Because if you look at President Trump's 2021 budget proposal, you will see all of that pork spending requested by him. All that money that you're so upset about going to other countries, it was requested by President Trump in his 2021 budget. So then you might be saying, well, wait a minute, this was a stimulus package, so that spending shouldn't have been in a stimulus package. No, it wasn't a stimulus package alone. This is actually the funding for the government. This was an omnibus spending bill to keep the government open. And so you may have just heard about the stimulus because that's what you care about the most, and that's what the media highlighted. But what you may not know is that this funds the government. So there's all kinds of things in here that have nothing to do with the stimulus whatsoever. So here you have a situation where the president is not the president, the White House. I don't know how involved the president was, but the White House was negotiating with the House and the Senate. They all agreed upon the $600. They agreed upon all of this spending that you may or may not agree with. I have a huge issue with a lot of it. But they all came to this conclusion and they passed it, and it was this celebration. And then, of course, most Americans said, $600? What good is that going to do? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, suddenly the president of the United States wants $2,000, and he wants to get rid of the very spending that he asked for in his budget request. Is he playing 3D chess here? Is that what he's doing? Because to me, and to many Republicans, this is very frustrating. Because here's what's happening now. The House has now passed a $2,000 spending, or $2,000 per person. And now they've put themselves in a place where the president wants it and the House wants it. But these Senate Republicans who have been fighting against it with the aid of the president for the last few months, they've now been put in the unenviable position to where if they don't if they don't put it in place, the entire country is going to be looking at them like, what are you thinking? Whereas if the 600 had just passed and the president had said nothing and had held to his negotiation, then both the Republicans and the Democrats would get credit for this. But more than anything, the president would get credit for it. Because for whatever reason, the president gets credit for the bill when he signs it. The House and the Senate don't. And that's just the way it is. You've heard of Operation Warp Speed, right? Which the president touts as a way to get, he got the vaccine moving forward. Well, that was a bill. And it was passed by the House and the Senate. So they should all get credit for it. Republicans and Democrats. But they don't. It's just one of those weird things where the man who signs it, ultimately, he gets the credit for it and nobody else does. So I do not understand what the president is doing here. I don't think he's playing 3D chess. I think that he is in a grudge match. And he's holding you hostage for that grudge match. Now, it may turn out that because of what he's done, he'll get that $2,000 through. Now, was that his big 3D chess play to throw Republicans under the bus? Because let me tell you, the farther-reaching consequence that may result because of that is he's put the two Senate candidates in Georgia in a difficult place. And there's a lot of questions about how this will affect the runoff elections in Georgia. And could his actions cost the Republicans control of the Senate? I don't know. I asked you if the $2,000 payment is something that you could really use. Let me know. Comment in the comments and I'll see it. Even the $600. This is Dave Long. Hey, Dave, how's it going? I hope that they increase the $2,000 payments without increasing the total spent. Well, that would be nice. Get rid of some of the pork and just focus on the stimulus. Again, they had to keep the government open. So this was not just a stimulus bill. Susan says, how could that happen? Susan, can you be a little bit more specific with your question? And I'll answer it. But we cover a lot of ground here, so I'm not sure which part of the equation you're wondering how it could happen. I want to say hi to Bill O'Keefe on TikTok, and Civic, and Mario. Thank you for joining us on TikTok. Let's see. This is David on Facebook. Why couldn't Congress just agree to a small monthly stimulus check for a certain amount of time way back in April? Seems like that would have been a more efficient use of time. I agree with you, David. I totally agree with you. But they couldn't come together on anything. And a lot of people complained about the $600, like it wasn't enough. And my thought was, look, it's not enough, but they came together on something. And then all of a sudden the president comes out of nowhere and starts railing on it as though he wanted $2,000 the whole time. Where if he had, we would have known about it. His staff would have been negotiating for it. And we would have known about this pork spending the whole time. But again, he asked for that spending in his 2021 budget. Let's see, from Dave. I really feel like Trump is actively trying to bring the GOP down with him. I can't see rhyme or reason or logic to what he's doing. So either he is so far ahead of me on the chessboard, or he is not planning or negotiating or running these amazing tactics. He's just shooting from the hip, and he is letting his ego dictate his actions. That's what he's done for 4 years, in my opinion, so that's what I think he is doing now. Dave wants to know, did I ever get the last stimulus payment? He says he didn't. No, Dave, I never did. I never got a stimulus. So I'm hopeful maybe with this next one I will. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a conservative member of the media that I don't get a stimulus package. I don't really know. Oh, come on, Desiree. Desiree on Facebook says I could use the money to remodel my basement. Desiree, I know you're being tongue-in-cheek, but there are people out there who are taking out loans. They're cashing out their 401ks. They're on unemployment, and they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. So, this is Jim. He says, this is Jim on Facebook. Hey, Jim. Yes, enrollments are down. I lose 70% of my income for spring term. This would help. Well, I hope it comes through for you, Jim. I really do. It's really a strange place for me to be. Those of you who have been with me for a long time, you know that I am a conservative. I'm a Republican. That doesn't mean that I support Trump 100% of the time, because I let my principles guide me, not my partisanship. But if you would have told me 2 years ago that I would be spending a considerable amount of my broadcast time pitching for the government to go into debt to send stimulus checks to American citizens, I would have laughed at you and I would have said, no way. Because, I ran for Congress this last year, and one of my primary platform principles was that we're too much in debt. And we've got to make huge sacrifices to get out of debt. And before we start talking about any other type of spending or programs, we have got to stop mortgaging our children's future as a government. And I still firmly believe that. But the pandemic is so unique. It's so different that I actually have become an advocate for deficit spending for certain types of stimulus. And that's simply because it's out of your control and it's out of my control. Our local governments, our state government, our jobs, they're all telling us we have to stay home. We can't, like you heard from Jim, he's losing 70% of his income right now. Other people who are completely unemployed. This is due to no fault of their own. And it's because, in large part, their government is telling them that you can't work or you can't participate in commerce, or to businesses, you can't be open or you can't participate. And so in that case, in the short term, I believe that the only people who can act are the government. They're the only ones. The federal government, in this case, is the only entity that can keep people afloat. And for many, it is the difference between homelessness or having a home, or eating and being hungry. And I'm amazed that we've lasted this long. I'm amazed that the economy is doing as well as it is at this point. But a lot of it is, and is because they didn't just send people checks. They extended unemployment. And so that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. But people have had unemployment benefits, and that's kind of going on behind the scenes this entire time. So when you talk about payments going out to people this entire time, well, those who are unemployed, you got your unemployment insurance. Unless you were unemployed because you ran for Congress, and then you don't qualify for unemployment insurance. So I didn't get my stimulus, and I didn't get unemployment insurance. So I just really set myself up there. But it really is a strange thing for me to be advocating for deficit spending and a stimulus when it just, any other time, any other place, it would really go against my core values. But again, if you are based on principles, then sometimes other principles will override that. And I think that we have to try and keep this country out of a great recession. And if we don't take these actions, that is where we are heading. This is Terry. Did you qualify? Do you mean I did not qualify for unemployment insurance, if that's what you're asking, because I left my job. If you remember, I was on KSL News Radio as a talk show host. And then because I wanted to run for Congress, they let me go because you can't run for Congress and be on the radio at the same time. So then I spent 16 months unemployed running for Congress and living off of my savings. So too much time elapsed for me to be able to claim unemployment. And I didn't feel good claiming it anyway because it was kind of my own choices and actions that led to my unemployment. And so it wasn't even something, I did look into it eventually, but the state looked at me and said, no, not for you. Dave says, I agree that deficit spending for COVID stimulus is good. We should also work towards a balanced budget in the rest of the budget. I agree with you, Dave. And the other thing I would love to see, if we were responsible in our actions, is I would love to see with any deficit spending, some action attached, some future action attached, where that deficit spending could be made up. Like, what is it? Like, okay, we're going to deficit spend for this amount, but in 5 years, this is going to kick in and it's going to pay that back. So even if we can't balance the budget immediately, that there's some type of program built in to where that spending gets paid down. Our problem is that we deficit spend with zero plan for the future and zero effort to make up for it. And so that is a huge, huge problem. This is Hussein. We always help other countries, but why is it part of the stimulus package this time? Again, Hussein, it wasn't. This is part of the narrative that, and I think the mainstream media plays into this in their reporting, but this was an omnibus spending package to keep the government open and fund the government and do the normal everyday things of the government. And it had a stimulus portion included. It was not a stimulus package that had other things attached to it. Now, that may seem like semantics, but that's the reality. If Trump hadn't assigned this stimulus or the spending package, the government would have shut down because it included spending to keep the government open. So this was your regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill, keep the government funded package, and it had stimulus included. Does that make sense? Now, as far as the issue of helping out other countries, I really would have to see the justification for all of these things. Because, I'm not a fan as much of a fan as others when it comes to Trump's America First. I think it's too aggressive because I do think that we have to be aware of others, and I don't think that we have to exclusively be America First. I think that we can always keep our interests top of mind, but still help other people I think his philosophy tends to be more America only instead of America first. But I would have to see, why are we going into debt to spend $500 million to Egypt or whoever it was? Because to me, going into more debt when we don't have the money, if we have surpluses and we're helping out other countries, well, that's a totally different story. But when we don't have surpluses, we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're sending deficit dollars to other countries, that's a little bit harder to grasp onto. And it's not something that I openly support. I don't understand or know the logic for sending all of these dollars there. And so I'm with you in that regard, Hussein. I don't understand why we're doing that. If we can go into debt to send money to other countries, why can't those other countries just go into debt? Do they not have good credit? And if they don't have good credit, why are we sending them money? You know what I mean? All right. Any other questions? Questions on TikTok, questions on Twitter or YouTube or Periscope? Any other comments about the stimulus and the $2,000? I'm going to bet at this point the $2,000 is not going to happen. I don't think Mitch McConnell is going to take this up. I would be very surprised, because one of the reasons why it took so long to get this far is because Republicans drew the line at $600. Now maybe Trump has pushed them into a corner and they have to go at the $2,000 now. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think we'll hear from Mitch McConnell. Has anybody heard from Mitch since we've gone on the air? Anybody? Anybody heard from Mitch McConnell? I haven't. So we'll have to watch and see how that goes. This is B. B says, I've heard that Trump caved on $600. Well, all I know is this, B. And B is on Periscope, by the way. All I know is that Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, has been at the Capitol every day for months negotiating with the House and the Senate on this stimulus. And he's been negotiating on the part of President Trump. And there came a point when they had put this stimulus together and Mnuchin said, yes, Trump will go for that. And that was the $600. That was the spending. So the House would have never even had the vote. They would have never even called a vote. And neither would the Senate. If they didn't believe in good faith from Steve Mnuchin that the White House would sign off on the $600. They would have never done it. You haven't had a vote on it for months. Why? Because they typically, with this type of thing, they do all of the negotiating ahead of time. So they thought they had a deal. It was a handshake deal. Yes, President Trump will sign off on the $600. So they passed it in the House. The Senate passed it. They all thought they had a deal with the White House. Next thing you know, he sends out this video and he rails on the pork spending in the stimulus package, and he says he wants $2,000. I guarantee that was the first time people had heard about that. So it's completely backwards. Now, is he playing some kind of 3D chess? I don't know. I think it's reckless abandon, not 3D chess. That's just me.